Hello and welcome back to Dangerous Dialogues. For Pride, because it's Pride Month. Yay, Pride. That is the second week in a row I have chosen to sing in this introduction. Lord knows why. But I'm joined by two people with excellent singing voices, surprisingly. That is our token ally, Valentina. No. She told me to say that. Zoe, and of course the wonderful Edward. Whoa, the hair flicks are real today, Edward.
Yeah, I know. What little there is, I'll work it.
I love how for Pride Month you've also come dressed as Britney.
Yeah. That was a bad one. That was a really bad one. On every level.
Today we were talking about being illegal, and there are still so many countries where it is illegal to be homosexual. It is illegal to be somewhere on the LGBTQ spectrum. Lots of countries where that is just the law, punishable by imprisonment, but other countries where it is still punishable by death. And today we're kind of trying to unpack that a little bit as people who are all kind of noting our white privilege from the UK and live in a relatively stable country. I don't really believe what I'm saying, but anyway, in terms of our rights, our country is certainly one of the more comfortable places to live, I would say. It's kind of difficult to start this one and ask everyone how they feel about this topic, like what it means to them. But I guess the question is, like, how does it actually make you feel that there are places in this world, on this planet, that that we or that your friends can't actually legally go?
Confused and annoyed is the immediate response for me.
Yeah. I'm a bit lost for words, to be honest, on it. I know we're about to talk about it for an hour, but I'm perplexed that there are, in this day and age, laws that prohibit just people's existence. I think that's what I want to say.
Yeah.
I do think it's really, I know this is early stages yet, but I do think it's really important to point out at this stage that's been mentioned, that there are countries that in which it is illegal to be gay. We're not talking about sodomy legislation here, where it's illegal to be involved in homosexual sex, of which there are many countries in which that is also illegal.
Yeah.
But there are several. There's over a dozen where it is actually just illegal to be a homosexual.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're not a rich white cis man, you don't matter.
Heterosex man, cis man, sorry.
Yeah. Hetero, cis, white, rich, male.
Many of these countries are
You
African
don't matter.
countries, so maybe not so much the white part as well, but yes.
Is slightly off topic. Is hetero and is cis adjective? Because we're describing with those words. Or are they pronouns?
They're adjectives, because
I feel like, they're used as adjectives nowadays, yeah.
Okay.
They're adjectives in the Greek as well, because hetero just means opposite, and cis, I don't actually know the derivation of the word, but anyway.
Fair. Okay, thanks, sis. Cool. Moving on.
Sorry.
That was the shittest setup for a joke ever, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We're trying to keep it light because obviously this is a really heavy topic to talk about. I think we're going to start with something that I recently found, and I wish everyone would know about. So we're going to put a link in the description to it, called the LGBTQ plus Danger Index. And this is a list of every country in the world, and it breaks it down really, really helpfully to show where it's legal to, I guess, exist, what it's legal to do when you're in that place, and what rights you do and don't have as an existent human being in these places. It's sort of only occurring to me at this point that because we host this via Zoom, I could possibly even put this on the screen. Like a TED talk. Maybe I'll do that. But first, I'm gonna I'm gonna maybe, because I know we've all got this website up at the moment, maybe throw over to Zoe so that you can kind of break down what this index is made up of. So it's made up of 10 different points, right?
Yes, yeah. So in this list for the best and worst countries for the LGBTQIA plus travel, they've got 10 different categories in which they rate safeness, basically. Safeness and the ability to exist, and equality with others. So number 1 is legalized same-sex marriage. Number 2 is worker protections. Number 3 is protections against discrimination. 4 is criminalization of violence. 5 is adoption recognition. 6, is it a good place to live? 7, transgender legal identity laws. 8 is trans murder rates. 9 is illegal same-sex relationships, and 10 is propaganda/morality laws.
And just to kind of give context to all of them, those are all, I would argue, things that any human being on this planet would like visiting a country. The legal side of being able to work if you were to live in that country, and protection against discrimination, regardless of who you are. You don't want to kind of be hate crimed. The right to marry, we talked about a lot last week, but you know, it's still something there, etc., etc. These are all, I think, Zoe, it's interesting to hear from you. If you were to go to a country and you were considering visiting or even moving to that country, I assume that a lot of these are things that you just would want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And to be honest, a lot of these things are not things that I would need to consider straight away. Right. Being, you know, as the token hetero, these are, I'm in a position where I don't need to majorly consider, am I this safe? On the other hand of that, as a woman, there are certain places where I'm not as safe. So it's difficult, but there's a lot of places that reading this now, it's things I will consider more. I mean, I don't travel often. I don't plan on moving to many places, but there's a few places on here I probably would never have visited in the first place. And those of which I'm highly surprised about.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to go through this list a little bit in a rather different format to, I guess, how we usually do a Dangerous Dialogue. But I guess just to highlight a lot of things and a lot of things about countries. Number 189, this sounds like I'm being clickbait. You'll be surprised at number 189. But you will, because I think it is a big holiday destination for a lot of people. And I will never probably be able to go on holiday there. I actually worked on a show that toured to this place, and we had a safety talk before the show toured to this country, because of safety, I guess, for everyone, not just from an LGBTQ plus perspective. So I will unpack that further. But as I've worked out, I can share the screen during this. So here we go. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is the website we're talking about, and here's everything that Zoe's just gone through, and it the way that it kind of breaks it down here. So here is the bottom end of the list. I'll give you the kind of maybe kind of 10 odd of those. So you can see here how it breaks things down. The thing that catches my eye immediately, personally, is this column 9, which talks about imprisonment or death penalty. Every single one of the countries currently in front of us, you can be imprisoned or killed. Yeah, I mean that's bewildering to me. Bluntly, there's not a lot of countries here that I had necessarily considered visiting anyway, because there's certain countries here that have, like Afghanistan, for instance, down the bottom there, that is you know, a war zone. So I don't necessarily foresee any of us taking a wee trip out to Afghanistan at the moment, at least, but who knows what the future holds. But I guess a country like Malaysia, I've got Malaysian friends that I'd love to visit. But sorry, for both of you, what strikes you with this bottom end of the list immediately?
The number one surprise for me here is the fact that Guyana is here, actually. And that might seem like something that's slightly odd that I've said that, but that's really strange to me for a couple of reasons. Namely, number one, for those of you who don't know, whether that's people in this Zoom room or whether that's people watching the stream, Guyana is a country on the northern coast of South America that is effectively a Caribbean country. Caribbean countries, whilst they tend not to have particularly good pro-LGBT legislation, they do tend to be fairly friendly for visiting members of the community. So the fact that Guyana is here as a Caribbean country, that's very interesting. Number two, there are two places, one of which is French Guyana and the other is Suriname, formerly Dutch Guyana, which are right next door, who are not here. And you might be able to tell by their names that they are rather closely culturally and historically linked. So the fact that Guyana has decided to go so far this way, but the other two haven't, is I want to know why that is, but that's number one thing for me that jumps out.
Zoe, what about you? What kind of jumps out at you on this list?
Well, one, I'm really not good at geography because I've not heard of a few of these.
That's all right.
To be honest, of the ones that I do know, I'm not surprised that they're this far down the list, or up, depending on which way you go. It's not majorly surprising. There's not one that I'm incredibly shocked by, but I think that's more to do with my lack of knowledge of the countries rather than anything else. So yeah, these I'm not that surprised with what I'm seeing.
Yeah, which is, it's a shame in a way, isn't it? You kind of, I don't know, I have high expectations for the world. I'm generally a relatively positive person, but I'm sort of lost for words, and it makes me want to cry a little bit to think that I can see several countries here where if I was to be in the country, not doing anything else, just literally in the country, I would be legally punished by death. In Brunei, I could be stoned to death. In Nigeria, I could get 14 years in prison, or I could potentially face the death penalty. Edward, you mentioned just before we went on this stream about kind of Nigeria. Kind of pass over to you to
the short version is that Nigeria is an interesting, it's more or less outlier when it comes to this, because the southern half of Nigeria is predominantly Christian and the northern half is predominantly Islamic, and the Islamic states, which are in Nigeria, the Islamic majority states, mostly follow Sharia law, which prescribes a death penalty for Nigeria. Don't get me wrong, in the southern Christian states, it is not by any means an Eden. It is still one of the worst places to be in the world as an LGBT plus person. It just happens to be that they'll put you in prison for 14 years rather than kill you.
I mean, I can't speak for these countries, but I assume that women's rights in quite a few of them are also really not great. So, I mean, for yourself, Zoe, I don't necessarily all of us seeing a dangerous dialogue from Kuwait in the future. But yeah, I guess we've started at the worst of it here, really, in terms of our legal rights. And just to reiterate these things that were above here, these are the basic rights, these sort of first 5 here, I would say, that we're talking about. The 8th one is literally about people being murdered, and like regardless of law. And as you can see here, they're kind of, none of them are highlighted at all. Just going a little bit further down, there's obviously some countries that are worth mentioning here. I previously mentioned the UAE. Dubai is like just that holiday destination that I hear so many people who are going on like a big trip go to Dubai, and that is the show that I worked on went to Dubai. And I just felt like it was perplexing to me that we were getting a safety talk about existing in a country that we've been invited to perform a show. And I'm a bit lost about that one, personally. And I understand that, a lot of these countries down this in the end of the list, I guess some of them would argue it's a religious choice to punish some of these things. But I mean, Edward, I don't know how you feel about that, but I just don't think religion is ever really an excuse to ignore someone's existence, right?
No, I completely agree. This will come as a surprise to you two, I suspect. So this is maybe a bombshell moment. But I don't actually have that much of an issue with fellow Christians who are opposed to gay marriage. I do have an issue with fellow Christians who are opposed to, who think that you should be imprisoned or you should lose your rights for being gay. But like I mentioned last week, that the Roman Catholics, for example, it is the present day teaching of the Roman Catholic Church that gay marriage, same-sex marriage cannot be allowed, but that homosexuals must be afforded the same rights under the law as heterosexuals. That is not my position, but that is a position I can respect. And I think that's the baseline that any religion ought to take. And it's a saying that all people are deserving of the same rights under the law. And whatever choices you take in terms of your views beyond that is up to the individual, whether they want to follow this or that religion. That's my position.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think that's it at the end, is that I think where I potentially differ slightly on that viewpoint is that I don't feel like when it comes to people, and I'm not saying this was your viewpoint, to clarify, I don't necessarily feel like it's people's right to remove other people's rights.
No.
Exactly.
I just sort of feel like we live in a world that's already quite driven by a lot of hatred. So I feel like it's so weird I just can't really formulate these words, because it really stresses me out a lot. And it's why I think Pride Month is so important, that these countries that, we go and wave our pride flags at a march and we're excited by that, and then you go to a club and that's great, that's Pride Month, but it's really not. We're looking at sort of countries here where that is such a far away thought for so many people. When they can exist, they won't be able to marry the people that they like, they won't be able to be in the company of other people that they like. And this list in front of us, we've even scrolled down onto our second set of countries, and there's still things like that. So I guess I think no one should have the power to take away those rights from other people.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on that front. I think one of the world's biggest problems is religion. This is my personal opinion. I can't speak for anyone else, but I think religion makes up so many issues in the current climate. There's been wars over religion. There are still wars over religion. There's belief systems that cater to certain people. I'm of the perspective, and we spoke about this in the abortion dialogue. I'm of the perspective, you don't like something, don't do it.
Yeah.
You don't agree with gay marriage, you don't like gay marriage, don't have a gay marriage. That's not for you to then dictate it to other people. What right do you have to tell another human being how they can live their lives and how they should live their lives? You don't want to live that lifestyle, you don't agree with that lifestyle, don't live it.
You are absolutely right, Zoe. I think the bit that I have to disagree slightly with is I don't necessarily hold religion responsible for that. I do certainly hold.
Many people interpretations of religion is the issue. The interpretations of the religion is the issue.
I was going to jump in and at this point and say, and I know this is slightly irrelevant because this is marriage again rather than what we're talking about specifically this week. but actually many, I misspoke slightly a moment ago. I do not personally know any Christians who think gay marriage should be illegal. I know Christians who disapprove of it, and for the reasons that I've articulated, I can respect that.
Yeah.
But what may interest you to know is that I wouldn't say most, but a surprising amount of the Christians who I know who disapprove of gay marriage are themselves, in fact, gay, which is perplexing. I know why they think that, but to explain that, we'd be here for another 5 hours, so I'm not going to.
It's less the religion itself, it's more the interpretations of that. But again, I'm just of the viewpoint of, you don't agree with it, you don't like it, don't do it. No one's forcing you. No one's saying just because things are being legalized more in the Western countries, or well, we won't touch on that.
By and large,
we'll get to
that. No one's saying that you then have to do these things. Yeah. That's not what these legislations are for. They're just to give protection and give rights to other people that actually genuinely exist in this world, because it's not just a certain number of people and a certain type of person that exists that should have rights. It's going to be a lot harder for us to do anything in other countries because they are not, I don't want to say the word backwards. I'm going to use the word traditional in their sense, conservative on that side. And there's not a lot us as individuals, like us three, can do to change their perspectives. We're going to do a lot better work in our own kind of countries and areas. But it's so difficult to see from my perspective, being hetero, as I've mentioned so many times. I don't know how many times can I mention that I'm hetero. From my perspective, like, it's so hard to see.
1 million times.
It's so hard to see, like you guys have been my friends for years, and I have many friends who, oh God, I hate saying that. I'm friends with, I have gay friends.
She's so fucking popular.
No, I have so many friends who do come under the LGBTQIA plus community, and to know that there's so many rights being taken away from people who are just like you guys, like, it's hurtful for me, and I can't imagine how it is for those of you who are getting these, or who do have to deal with fighting for these rights. I mean, Pride Month, wonderful, but I think sometimes people lose the real meaning behind it and where it came from.
100%.
I think some people take it for granted now in certain places.
I think this is it, isn't it? Like, Pride Month is at its core about visibility and about the fight for rights and equality. Is, I mean,
it's never over.
No, it isn't. And I mean, we've talked a couple of times just now about us visiting these countries or how we would exist in these countries, but really that's secondary, because there are already people in these countries, and this is why, I mean, this is not about immigration either, but no. It's why immigration is such an important thing in countries, because actually there are people that face persecution on these lists for us, exactly what we've talked
just
about.
Just being themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's important that they have the ability to get to another country where they are safer, where it is okay for them to exist. And I think that is why I struggle hugely, amongst 1,000 other reasons, with the UK's current policy about shipping people off to Rwanda. Because
like the Bill of Rights that's coming in.
Yeah.
Rwanda, incidentally, is a country that is not doing very well on this list. But that's by the by. So,
no, that's exactly what I wanted to come on to, actually. Do you, what number was it, Edward?
I'm just checking now.
I should preface this while everyone's looking at that by saying the UK currently falls at number 6 on this list. It's in the top 10. It's bizarrely one of the best places to be as an LGBTQ plus person. I'm sure we'll go and debate that in a sec, but
Rwanda is number 140.
140. Wow. So there's a vast difference, I would say, in the rights between one and the other. wow, I'm just gonna share screen again for that one. Edward, do you want to talk through that one? Here it is.
Yeah, so this is Rwanda. As you can see, they have no legal protections whatsoever. I forget what that trans flag means in the key, the black and white trans flag. I think that means that I can't remember what that means in the key. I'm so sorry.
Scrolling back up, yeah. It's this one about
illegal.
Identity.
So it's illegal to change your identity. It's not. You will notice that many of these countries do not have a trans flag in that section, and what that means, even Iraq doesn't. I want to point that out. The countries flanking Rwanda here, Jordan and Iraq, do not have a trans flag of any kind in that section. What that means is that there is no law governing any part of changing your gender, meaning that technically speaking, you could choose to identify as transgender, and that the law would respect that because it has no option other than to. But in the country we're talking about, Rwanda, they have actually made it illegal for you to do that. They have deliberately gone out of their way to legislate and say no, that is illegal. And then you have, I don't know, 135 other countries where it gets increasingly better for LGBT plus people. But
I mean, on that exact note, I mean, I remember the Olympics, the Winter Olympics several years ago. There was a big hoo-ha about Russia and its stance on LGBTQ plus rights and, in fact, women's rights. But it's above Rwanda on this list.
Yes.
Here it is at 132. And yeah, I don't know. I think that potentially says quite a lot.
Yes, I think it does. I mean, Russia is, and I'm not going to claim again that it's a paradise for LGBT plus individuals in the Russian Federation, and I'm certain, and I'm not going to talk much about Russia at all, given the present situation. I have misspoken there by inserting an L where there should have been an R. So I'm going to say the unpleasant present situation. But I was quite annoyed in around about, like you say, the 2014 Winter Olympics, because there was so much buzz about Russia, and it felt like the message was, at least for me at the time, it felt like the message was that Russia is the only place in the world right now where gay people are having a problem. Now, I know that's not the intention of the people who were taking a stand against it, but I was so annoyed to see people focusing so much on a country like Russia. Okay, I've matured now. I acknowledge that they were doing so because it was a country in the news and so on. But there were and are many countries where before and after the 2014 Winter Olympics you could be killed that people still aren't really talking about. And that one got on my nerves. Anyway, sorry.
No. Mm-hmm. We're here to vent. I kind of want to sort of try and bring some light and positivity to our conversation a little bit, and think about we're here as a theatre company, and we've talked the last few weeks about what art's place is in topics like this. How do we make progress? How do we make change through theatre, through arts? I want to open that up to everyone. I mean, I'm not the oracle of how we make queer theatre that makes change, but for me, a big bit of it is that visibility and kind of education, as we talk about so much on this, allowing your theatrical piece or piece of art to enlighten people, because change is made through masses. And I think, we've talked about abortion before on the Dangerous Dialogues, and I think the reaction to what's currently happening in the States with Roe vs. Wade will inevitably invoke some change in some places. I hope for the better, because I think there is a country in outrage at the moment. I think there's a lot of countries in outrage about it at the moment. But I wonder if, I mean, California, for instance, has passed a bill already saying, yes, you can have an abortion here. As a response to that. But the reason I mention that is because it's a very real issue at the moment, and I think, you know, positive change can be made through art, through that. I'm gonna get off my soapbox there and let other people speak. But how do you think arts and theatre can make positive change on this topic?
I think personally the same way as that, like I've mentioned before, like art and theatre and everything linked to it, it is there to influx emotion, and it is there to press on emotions of some sort. And sometimes it's a lot easier to get emotions going and get thought-provoking things going by seeing it in front of you in some certain way. You know, I always find that I can very much disassociate and separate an article from my emotions and how I'm feeling. But if I'm seeing things on a screen or in front of my eyes, not just reading it, it is going to make me think and make me feel a lot differently. And I think that's the same, especially in this like this social media kind of culture as well. Like it's a, you know, like people are constantly watching like TikTok videos and videos of some specificity. I can't say that word.
You did.
Oh, I did. Okay,
yeah, that was it. That was right.
Thank you. Yay! I know English. I just find that it's a lot easier to get your point across nowadays in some sort of art form, whether that is a TikTok video, a YouTube video, a film, a movement piece. It influences people's thoughts more.
Yeah.
Thoughts and opinions, and either it's going to cause outrage, depending on who's watching it, or it's going to make people really genuinely think, oh God, I have to do something about this, you know.
And as a slight side note to that, but I do think it's related. I'm reminded of, I'm bringing out all the standard grade drama stops here. I'm reminded a bit of Artaud, Antonin Artaud. Yes, yeah, that's the one. Because I'm sure, and I'm please, if oh, Zoe's gone.
Okay.
If any of the crabs are present, which they may be, I don't know. Tom knows who I'm talking about. They're probably going to hate me right now because I can't remember the name of his book in which he says this. But he goes on to talk about how in a really great performance, often a performer has put so much of themselves into it that until they come off the stage, they can often feel as if they're actually there. And he talks about how he feels like, as a result, he doesn't often remember his time on stage. He can remember going on, he can remember coming off. He can't remember what he did on stage because he was so in character. And that's an extremely powerful thing to witness, no matter what the message of the piece is. 100%. And it's even better when the message is a positive one, of course, or a negative one, depending on what the context is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think even thinking of the UK specifically, because it's where the three of us are, you know, there are still productions and things that we can mount that will still create change in a country that's supposedly in the top 10 for rights for LGBTQ plus people. I'm thinking specifically of a few things in my head, but Legally Blonde, that's on at the moment in London, which is obviously a very well-known musical anyway, has a cast made up of like everything that you could possibly want out of representation. There's lots of people of color, there's lots of queer people from the whole spectrum, and most notably there's a considerable amount of trans and non-binary people in it. And the reason I mentioned that specifically is because I think that's where we're fighting for rights still in this country primarily. Again, I'm not trying to profess kind of any superior knowledge on this topic, but I think the reason that I feel like the UK is so regressive sometimes is because even though I do feel like we're moving backwards with rights for everyone, not just for our particular community that we're discussing for Pride, I do feel like the trans community again, noting that we're all kind of cis here, but I do feel like the trans community gets an unnecessary amount of, or lack thereof, of the rights. And I think a lot of that comes from people not really understanding or knowing. And I think that's why it's so important that even in a production like Legally Blonde, that is not particularly queer per se. It's really fucking queer, let's be honest, actually.
The subject matter isn't. The subject matter
right,
isn't.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's not a show that is overtly about X, Y, and Z, but they've managed to keep the story as it is, make it wholesome, and give it this extra really interesting layer. The reason I mention that is because I think art is that powerful that actually you can take something that exists that has nothing to do with that topic, and without corrupting it, make change, make positive change. And I think that's what a production like that has done.
I like how in that particular one, like the focus isn't on the fact that they're people of color or that they're people of the LGBTQIA community. It normalizes it. It's like these are people.
Yeah,
right.
Normal people. My mom and I were actually having a conversation today. I just wanted to bring this up. Like, I think a lot of it, not just theater wise, but also it comes from like my generation and slightly older, slightly younger, teaching their kids. Like, Riley's got a very diverse class ethnically, and he is also aware that non-binary people exist, trans people exist, homosexual people exist. He is very aware because I want to normalize that from a young age.
Right.
Because when they grow up to think that something's different, that's when your intolerances start and you're not understanding. So if people are being taught from a young age, like, this is just normal.
Yeah.
These are all people.
Yeah.
These are all people who are equal to you. I think that can also create a lot of change, which is something that I find I can do as a parent.
Yeah.
And I would really love other parents to be able to do, because there's this whole thing about like keeping their innocence and that, and like you can't keep their innocence. Like, he knows I exist.
Yeah,
he knows I'm a female. He knows I have a vagina. You know, because you don't get any privacy when you're a parent. So it's nothing to do with their innocence being spoiled. I still keep him protected from the major evils in this world, which are not all the other people that exist in this world.
There's a difference between explaining to a child that, for example, some men want to be with other men rather than with girls, and some girls are in men's bodies, for example. There's a difference between explaining that and explaining the nitty-gritty of bedroom stuff, which you shouldn't be explaining at all. You're a parent. They should, if your child grows up and finds themselves to be non-heterosexual of whatever kind, then they should explore that themselves. And I don't think anyone with a brain is seriously disputing that.
I think it was on TikTok actually. It was Twitter. Of course, it was fucking Twitter. Everyone's angry on Twitter. I saw a tweet about exactly what you're both talking about, which was about education and you know, well, why don't we tell our kids about this? And the argument is always, well, you know, they need shielded from these things, and the reality is they don't. But it's because, oh no, but they won't understand. And you go, well, why are there TV shows about like little blobs and aliens and talking dogs? Like, how are they going to understand that? That's complicated. Ridiculous.
Oh my God, Riley's watching a program at the moment that's about a slice of bread owning a barber shop and his assistant is a milk carton.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I know, you know, like what's that? And how they come to understand is through teaching.
Yeah.
So yes, okay, they're not going to understand the first time you tell them, but they're going to understand. And I'm totally fine with Riley asking me any sort of questions along those lines. Anything, you know, I don't like him looking at a person and being like, you're different from me. Yeah. I want him to look at all people and be like,
as a person. Yeah.
That's another person. That's another human who is just as equal and just as able to be on this planet as I am.
True that. Yeah, that's what makes you a good parent, to be honest. That and
there's other things that make me not, but
Yeah. We're not here to talk about that.
No, we'll do a different
Riley knows how to flip
parenting.
me off now.
Oh,
why have we never done a dangerous dialogue about parenting?
I don't know. I'm waiting for you to come up with things.
That's a good point, actually.
You need to do that.
Yeah, note that down. Get that down right now. Anyway,
I kind of want to take us to the opposite end of the list now, and talk about that lovely top 10, where apparently this is the 10 safest places in the world. I mean, you can see more than 10 on the screen now, but up the top there, Canada, and then closer to home for us, at least in the Europe, Sweden and Netherlands and Malta, Portugal, the UK, here we are, Belgium, Norway, Spain, France, Iceland, Switzerland. Really interestingly, they are legalizing same-sex marriage next week.
Yeah.
There it is, and
on Friday specifically.
On Friday, yeah.
Woohoo! It's Friday.
It's Saturday, Sunday. What? It's Friday again. But it's not an ordinary Friday, Switzerland. But it says a lot to me personally that Switzerland is just off the top 10 and only just legalizing same-sex marriage. I mean, great that they are, but that's so interesting that there are other countries lesser than that have legalized same-sex marriage. And a lot of that comes down to some of the columns here, which kind of talk about people voting on their quality of life in these places. And obviously things about sort of hate crimes and whatnot here. Obviously we're looking at the UK because it's where we live there. But it receives an A minus. It's not perfectly on an A right at the end here overall, which is interesting.
The one that I find really interesting here is Malta, because I can't for the life of me remember what it was that I heard about, but there was some social issue that I heard about that Malta was very, 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 very conservative on the subject of. And I'm being genuine. I'm not being facetious. I'm being genuinely serious when I say there was definitely something, but I can't remember what it is. And so the fact that they're here when it comes to LGBT plus stuff as number 4, that's quite interesting, to say the least. But great. At least they're doing great in one area. And I say the same thing about the UK to an extent. At least we're number 6 in one area. Yeah.
Social deprivation. No, sorry.
What one good area?
Yeah. Yeah, we are very entitled, aren't we? We really are, because we've sat and complained a little bit.
Yeah.
And certainly in our chat last week about marriage equality, that we've complained a lot. But the reality is that we're in a very comfortable, very, very comfortable position there on this list. And don't get me wrong, although we're referencing this list a lot, it's not by any means definitive, I would say, but it's a really good reference point for us. We, as I've mentioned, I'll put a link below so that people can kind of look to maybe find their own country and whatnot. I just want to scroll down to Ireland here at 20, where they passed the abortion laws not long ago. Well, the vote, more correctly.
Yeah.
The laws have yet to be implemented. But I think that's really interesting that in a way, I'd almost argue that LGBTQ rights have surpassed women's rights there.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of another bombshell. But
I'm also going to say it doesn't surprise me because I've lived there, but I'm willing to bet a lot of people are surprised at South Africa being at 21, which is another quite interesting one, I think.
Yeah, I was surprised both at it being there and it being like quite a few spaces ahead of the US.
Yeah. Um,
I surprised with how low down the US was.
South Africa is one of these interesting countries, like some Central European ones. In fact, look, they're right there, like Slovenia and Croatia, where I would say you're fairly likely, certainly more likely than you are in the UK, to receive, to encounter homophobic attitudes.
Yeah.
You are not often going to encounter actual abuse or even verbal abuse. You will encounter it more often than you will encounter it in the UK, but it's not a common occurrence as such. Not to say that there isn't room for improvement, of course.
I mean, I think with any of these, there are room for improvement.
Yeah.
Even Canada up the top, I think. But that, to me, that's what progress is always trying to look for areas where you can improve. And I think that's where a country like Canada's really succeeded, because they are the right sort of self-critical as a country. I want to highlight the US. You mentioned there, the 24. I think I am very surprised that it's that high, actually, because I think it says it a lot, actually, here when you see that there are still areas over here where you can actually be imprisoned.
I think up until especially like the last few months, like I would have thought the United States would have been higher up. Again, that's probably just down to me not being educated enough, but like all these trans rights that are being taken away, especially in a good number of states. It's surprising to see how much they're regressing, and also not surprising at the same time, which is strange.
Yeah.
Can I take? Sorry, go on, Tom.
Okay, yeah, no, I think we seem to idolize the Western world a lot. Maybe it's because that's where we're from, as this image of progress. And I think places like the States and the UK are, for whatever reason, the places that seem to be the symbolic place of progress and democracy. But the reality is
it's
that
just not true.
It's just not true. Yeah, exactly.
That leads really neatly into what I was going to say. So thank you for going first. Anyone that knows me will know that I really, really, really hate Whig history. By that I mean I really hate this idea that all of human history is just a transition from bad to better, and we're just constantly getting better and better and better and better. And we're going to go to the moon and be an interplanetary species and all the rest. No, I don't buy that for a second. And LGBT rights are actually a really interesting way to observe that isn't true. And I'm not just talking about in the modern world, because I have an interesting historical tidbit.
Sodomy.
What? Moment. All right. I have an interesting historical tidbit to talk about, if you don't mind my sharing.
Bits are great.
So it's relatively well known that France, during the French Revolution, actually decriminalized homosexuality. They were one of the first countries in modern history to do that. Then later on in the revolution, many other countries who were aligned to France started adopting their constitution, and by proxy started adopting also decriminalization of homosexuality. One of these countries was Bavaria, who in 1864 had an 18-year-old openly gay man come to the throne as the king of Bavaria. He did not have a good reign, but that wasn't so much to do with his sexuality. It was more to do with the fact that he was an 18-year-old that didn't know what he was doing running a country. He was a huge fan of Wagner, think pop idol fan, and he invited Wagner to come and live in Bavaria and build theaters there so he could just make it's a great story, to be honest. But anyway,
why is this not a huge movie?
Yeah, there are movies, but
there?
Yeah, there are two. Anyway, that's another story for another time. The sad part about Ludwig, he had a sad end. I won't talk about his end just now because it's slightly irrelevant to what the point I'm trying to make here is. But when Bavaria became part of Germany in 1871, the little regional kings of what had been these independent countries were allowed to retain their titles and some of their authority, and Ludwig was no exception. but they wrote a new constitution in which they recriminalized homosexuality.
What?
He was therefore, for the next 13 years of his reign and last 13 years of his life, a king of a country in which he was illegal to be in.
Wow.
And then it took another further 80 odd, longer than that, 80-ish years for Germany to re-legalize homosexuality again. So that's my historical tangent for this week.
Edward,
Mm.
why didn't you mention he was beautiful?
Oh yeah. Like I so would.
Beautiful.
Like he's probably my number one historical,
My historical,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, there we go. That's some research for the evening. Anyway, well, I mean, you're right. Progress is not linear. And regression isn't either. I think, there's much a talk in this country about sort of the regression of rights just generally, because of a lot of political things that have happened here in the last 10 years. But I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. I don't know, I do find history cyclical though. So which I guess is not linear, so like that makes sense. So I do sort of feel like you eventually get back to where you kind of started.
Even the darkest night ends and the sun rises, but that's not. That doesn't mean you should ignore the fact that the night is there. Is the way I would put it.
And it often is.
Yeah.
History likes to repeat itself.
Because no one was listening the first time around.
Yeah.
History likes to repeat itself. That's what she said. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my.
We have.
But what he said made sense. He did what he said made sense. Because people don't pay attention the first time.
It did, yeah.
So they're like, let's do this again.
I'm getting under the table now.
I think a lot of what we're taught though is we're just, especially in schools, especially when sitting in history, what I can remember being taught is the progression. We're not taught about the times it's gone back. We're taught from A to B and how we got from A to B, and not the times we've slipped back in to old habits or regressing backwards, etc. But you know what? It'll be really interesting in like 10, 15 years time when this time is being told about, how they're going to spin it and how they're going to teach it.
Yeah. History is written by the winner. And I think it is also bastardized by the writer, the winner, whoever you want to say. So I think,
in their favor.
Yeah, there's a reason that we weren't taught certain things, and it is inherently because they don't want us to know those things. Like I will never be able to comprehend properly the excuse that education systems have for not teaching me colonialism or the empire, that in any form that wasn't, oh my god, the empire was so cool, look at all this shit we had. Like yeah. But anyway, we digress. There's something that's really important before we wrap up. We need to just briefly address the elephant in the room.
I've only put on a few pounds, okay?
Not that.
No need for that.
That would be pot kettle black at best. That was me trying to make an elephant. I was trying to go. There you go. That's an elephant noise. But yes, the elephant in the room is that there is a young gentleman who has today turned 1,024 years old. He's seen all of history. Happy birthday, Edward.
Thank you.
Happy womb exit day.
Womb exit day.
Yeah, because I was going to say happy vagina exit, but not everyone comes out.
Well, that's correct. Actually, Tom and I are both cesareans, so there we are.
Which means
but were you made in a test tube?
December? No, I'm joking. We obviously know that's wrong because it's June currently. But anyway, cool. Just to wrap up, what are you taking away from this conversation? Why should other people have their own one about the legalities of existing, let's say. Zoe, should we come to you first?
Sure. What I've taken away is geography of some places. Also, how bad the majority of places are. And I think this is a topic that needs to be continually spoken about because there's still progress to be made. Whether you're in the top 10 or whether you're in the bottom 10, there is still so much progress to be made within not just LGBTQIA rights, but with human rights in general. Just the right to be a human and respected and understood and allowed to exist.
Yeah.
And also, final note, fuck the Supreme Court justices that voted for Roe versus Wade being overturned.
Do that. Interestingly, on everything you just said, our topic next week is the death penalty, which feels actually quite fitting for a lot of things that we've talked about today, and things you've referenced as well, Zoe. We'll get onto it, but I just don't understand why it exists still. But anyway, Edward, what are you taking away? What are you going to ask people to do?
The primary thing that I'm taking away is that my friends are sane, which I knew anyway, but it's nice to have that reinforced when you live in a mad world like this. No, Zoe, stop doing that. You're sane when it came to things like that. No. Anyway.
No. You're good.
Lose my damn train of thought. Anyway, yes, and I'm also taking away a renewed appreciation for the role that the arts can play in making change, because it may seem odd to you three in the room with me, because you know how much time I spend thinking about art in my daily life, but I often forget about that. I get too bogged down with the semantics of how to create art and the meaning behind it that I forget about the change that it can create. And I often feel like change has to be something that feels much more action-based. And helping in change needs to be something much more action-based. And when I'm confronted with an issue that is terrible and I want to do something about it, I often get very frustrated when I feel like there's nothing I can do to help. And so what I have to say is there's people out there like me who often feel that they're frustrated that they can't do something. Maybe you don't have to do something. Maybe you have to be something. Maybe you have to create something. That's the phrase I pulled out of my arse today, but there we are.
Wow. What else came? No, anyway. Yeah, there's a lot of really beautiful gems in what you've both said there. I just agree. Honestly, I think the art thing actually was something that hit me most from that conversation too. I think using Legally Blonde as the reference was helpful, because actually I've never really unpacked until having this conversation that, you know, you don't have to specifically be so overt sometimes with your art making to get a message across. And I think that production's done that wonderfully. Yeah, I think it's made me really want to do a tour of something to countries that are in that middle of the list where, you know, we could legally go, but also try and create some really positive change. So I don't know, watch this space. A Pride Month every year re-inspires me and reinvigorates me to make things and to make good queer theatre. So we'll see what the next year brings. And please have your own conversations about these things. Yes. I think, you know, we had Zoe with us today, and I really hope that people see someone who's not LGBTQ plus having a conversation about something in Pride, and can also
I'm an ally.
Yeah, but you know, you are so important to this conversation because it's not just for gays anymore, as they say in Spamalot about theatre. But it really isn't. It's so important that we engage in topics and conversations that aren't our thing and that aren't about us, because it's the only way that change will happen. So
yeah,
happy Pride, everyone.
Be proud.
Be happy, be gay.